Okay folks, this is the wrap up on this series. There's some of the points we've covered. Road access, building site, outbuildings, gardens, water supply, power supply and livestock, improvisation and skills with supplementing food supply, as in hunting, trapping, fishing and that sort of thing. Okay, the off-grid homestead in this series is, shall we say, high-tech. The people living here have decided that they want to try and maintain some similar lifestyle to what they had when they were living on the grid in one of the cities that they moved up here from. So it comes down to lifestyle with living off grid. Now, what is your definition of living off grid? What is the lifestyle you hope to achieve? And there are a lot of vulnerabilities and there are a lot of pros and cons. Certainly with this place, yes, there's a lot of high-tech stuff, certainly with the solar system, house appliances, and through the video series you can see that all of this is very much integrated. Pumps, electric pumps for water reticulation, household appliances. You also need water reticulation around the property. Now, whether you use electric pumps or mechanical pumps that use fossil fuel, things like that. On the subject of road access, you've got to look at the roads, the conditions of the roads across all seasons, the right type of vehicles that you need to use these roads, and certainly look at the threats to access or evacuation on these roads. Now, some people prefer to go back to a more primitive lifestyle, and there's plenty of YouTube videos on that, people living in yurts and out in the wilderness, and there's some very good information on the forum Survival HQ about living out in the wilderness. And it's really a decision that in the preparation stage that you've got to really sit down and think about, you know, what sort of lifestyle do you want to achieve? Sit down and work out the needs, and there's a lot of prepping and planning that needs to go into it. Certainly if you're building your own place, there's a whole raft of issues you've got to look at: location, water reticulation, energy sources, livestock, food self-sufficiency, including gardens, and what you can hunt or gather from the bush. The other thing is too that a lot of these off-grid homesteads are in isolated areas, and I've seen it in many cases where people get caught up in the razzle-dazzle of living off the grid in off-grid homesteads, and it's an observation, not a criticism. You've also got to be mentally and psychologically prepared, because you are isolated. It's not just a matter of standing at the side fence and talking to your next door neighbour. And the people that you're living with in the house, be it family, friends, spouse, whatever the case may be, there are issues there too, because basically that's the only social interaction you've got most of the time. So you've got to look at skills about that. You've got to be psychologically prepared for it, in that, okay, people are going to have bad hair days, they always do, so you've got to look at that aspect of it. Conflict resolution, people are going to disagree, human nature. Other points to consider: Okay, as I mentioned, isolation. Living off-grid homestead. In theory, yes, this is an off-grid homestead. It's not connected to any grid sewerage, power, water, or any of the other grid requirements that you often find in city and urban areas. Are they truly self-reliant and truly self-sufficient? In some respects they are. They're providing their own power through a solar system, which has the pros and cons. Providing self-sufficiency in food. Well, this place, no, not quite. In part they are producing some of their own food and vegetables. I don't know that John does a lot of hunting around here. The only livestock he's running is poultry at the moment. And in the planning stages of homesteading, you've also got to look at, you know, what can the land support in the way of livestock and crops. That needs a lot of research. You also got to look at the lay of the land, the topography of it. If it's very rugged country like around here, thick bush, then you've got to look at what types of livestock you run. Cattle, goats, that sort of thing. And you've got to look at the human resources that are needed to live and survive on off-grid systems, off-grid homesteads. Now, at this time, there are only 2 people living here. But certainly if you want to expand it to become more self-sufficient in many areas, then you're going to need more human resources, which means you've got to become more self-sufficient in food, providing food for them, shelter, water, hygiene, things like that. Livestock, depending on what sort of livestock you're running, you may have to grow crops for them. That requires more human resources, more water, and other resources for fencing and shelters and things like that for livestock. So these are a lot of things that need to be considered in the planning and the prepping stage if you're looking at living off-grid. There's a whole lot more. Skills I touched on in improvisation. You need to have basic skills, modern basic skills. You also need to have primitive basic skills in that. In this case, if the solar system fails, yes, they've got a backup generator. Okay. What if the system falls over altogether? You know, have you got emergency lighting? Have you got the skills to light a fire to cook on? Because this place relies on bottled gas. And it comes down to self-sufficiency again. Okay, they're off-grid, as I said before, with a lot of the utilities, but they're still relying on the modern infrastructure to supply things like bottled gas, replace or repair modern appliances in the house, water pumps. You need fuel to run things like generators, vehicles. You certainly need things like more professional or contract work on, for argument's sake, the solar power system. A lot of that is a specialist area. So if something really serious goes wrong with the system, then you've got to call somebody else in to repair and rectify the problem, replace parts, whatever the case may be. Now that's relying on skills, modern skills from modern society, the infrastructure of modern society. So one really has to ask, in the case of true self-sufficiency, homesteads like this, are they truly self-sufficient? That's a question I'm asking you, and if you look through the video series, it may provide you with some answers. So that pretty well wraps it up, I think, at this stage. A picture tells 1,000 words. I've barely scratched the surface with this particular homestead. I could spend a year shooting videos around here and still not cover every topic. But I'm hoping this series gives you some idea of the problems, the solutions for in this case, modern off-grid homestead living. If you want to go back to more primitive styles, then you've got to really sit down and think about, in both cases, your needs first. Work out what you need to survive, and that's what it's about. It's surviving out here in isolated areas from day to day, week to week, month to month. Part of surviving it is sitting down, planning, talking to people about it, finding out information, realising what skills you've got, any additional skills you need, learning and practicing them. The social side of things that people don't realise, as I mentioned before, is that the psychological preparation for it. Now, I've seen many instances where people have moved into off-grid properties and they just can't hack it, and that's an observation, not a criticism. Just people, a lot of people just can't adapt to these off-grid homesteads or off-grid living very well at all. So you've really got to sit down and think about that too, because it takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of teamwork with the people living here, because your very survival on a day-to-day basis relies on that. You are relying on your skills, the teamwork, the whole social framework of people living on these homesteads in isolated areas to survive day to day. Alright, I think that pretty well wraps it up. Thank you for watching, for viewing. Comments are certainly welcome. I wish I had a more primitive type of homestead to video. The shipping container series I did about 12-18 months ago, that's certainly more primitive than what we've got here. And last but not least, my sincere thank you to the owners of the property, John and Sandy, for giving me permission to do the series of videos, looking at other resources in the bush, such as allowing me to fish in the dams for yabbies and so on. So my sincere appreciation and thank you for that. That's about it, folks. So sit back and enjoy, pick the eyes out of it, ask questions if you want to. I'll try and answer as many as I can. I don't sort of get too much into the personal life of these people. Are they survivalists and preppers? I don't know for sure. It's a discussion or a topic that we don't sort of talk about very much between ourselves. So maybe I can provide some more information on that later, maybe not. So we'll see how it goes. Thanks very much, and see you later.